Okay. Just on one point. Okay. All right. So, dear all, welcome. Welcome to the, I think, the last virtual session of the virtual week of Humanitarian Network and Partnership Weeks, where today we will discuss security analysis and how it optimizes humanitarian operations. So it is 1400. We're going to start the session. I'm going to start maybe with the arrangements and the administrative modalities of this session. This panel will last approximately 60 minutes, leaving 30 minutes after the panel exchange for questions and answers. The audience members can enter the question and answer in the Q&A chat window throughout the session, so as early as you want, and we will go through some of the questions taken by time of the 30 minutes. During the 30 minutes, we'll go through the questions and try to answer in due course. I just want to a word of caution. The participants, the panelists, will not answer or address questions related to ongoing world event. This is a broader topic on security analysis, and it is not made to ask specific analysis on what's going on currently in various parts of the world. So that's it. The session will be recorded. The recorded has started, and the video of the panel and the Q&A will be available through the UNHCR Field Security Service YouTube channel and the HNPW websites in the coming hours, days after the session. So for those of you who would like to promote and share the link, people will be able to listen to this session. All right. So with that said, thank you very much to all for coming. Thank you to the panelists. Welcome to the panel discussion on strategic insights, how security analysis optimizes humanitarian operations. So I'll start by saying in the last 24 months, conflicts, whether started, renewed, or escalated, have reached significant levels, both in numbers, but also levels of violence. And according to the Uppsala Conflict Data Program, the world in 2023 has reached the highest number of violent conflicts, internal, external, state-based or non-state-driven, since the Second World War. So in the face of ever-evolving global challenges, the need for accurate and comprehensive security analysis has never been more critical. So by sourcing, collating valuable data, identifying emergency trends, assessing potential threats, security analysis can serve as a cornerstone for effective security risk management within the humanitarian community. Today, we gather to explore how security analysis plays a pivotal role in assessing risks posed by various threats and changes in geopolitical, socio-economic security contexts, creating thematic and analytical products vital for informed decision-making within the humanitarian sphere. Throughout this session, with the panelists, we will delve into the multifaceted ways in which security analysis and information enable humanitarian delivery. We will also explore how security analysis safeguard both the safety of the humanitarian personnel and the communities we serve. Through a comprehensive dialogue and collaborative exchange, we aim to identify best practices, innovative strategies, and actionable solutions to enhance the resilience and effectiveness of humanitarian operations in an increasingly complex global landscape. So I am privileged, and I hope you are all privileged to be joined with to have a panel of experts in front of you, including security analysts, operational practitioners, security leadership of organizations, each bringing unique insight and perspective in this discussion. So it's my pleasure to be joined today by a panel of experts, subject matter experts on the subject. And I will start with David Katrude, the Security Director from WFP. I think Christina's not here, but Anne Carson, the Deputy Principal Security Coordinator for UNICEF. Michael Walker, the Director of Research and Analysis from the International NGO Security Office, INSO. And Gary Armutlu, Senior Threat and Risk Assessment Officer from UNDSS. Panelists, thank you for being here today. And to the audience, thank you for joining us. and we look forward to an insightful discussion ahead. So I will start with, and myself, sorry, Eric Le Guen, Senior Field Security Officer at UNHCR, and I'll be the moderator today for this session. All right, so kickstarting the discussion and the panel. Before we discuss these multifaceted ways of how security analysis can help operations, I think it's critical to focus on the core question, which is what is analysis and what is it not? And I'll turn to Gary and Michael as subject matter experts, providing security analysis on a day-to-day basis for various organizations. How would you explain analysis? So, Gary.
Well, let's walk the question backwards. Analysis is not an opinion, informed or otherwise. Every one of us is an analyst and a risk manager at a basic level. We all use analytical and risk management skills to determine, for example, if a specific neighborhood or section of a city is safe to walk through at night. Some are better at it than others. But at its core, analysis means to break apart, to decompose a problem into its important components. As a matter of fact, breaking apart is the essential foundation for all analysis. That is, to know how to, quote, unquote, do analysis is the sense of breaking apart and recognizing key variables. Now, I told you that to tell you this. Analysis enables us to think abstractly about our circumstances rather than just reacting to them. Let me say that again. Analysis enables us to think abstractly about our circumstances rather than just reacting to them. Regarding security analysis, look, it's simply the information component of security risk management that provides the analytical judgments that inform risk managers in their quest to minimize the potential impacts of threats, so you can go about doing what you need to do. And I would say that since about 2014, there's actually little distinction between security and political analysis. They are now so closely interlinked, they're actually parts of a whole.
Eric, it might just be me, but I think you're still on mute if you're trying to segue.
And you're totally right. So thank you very much, Michael. Michael, anything to add to Gary's first intervention?
Yeah, just really quickly, and thank you for having Inso here today. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak on this topic. And apologies to the audience. I think there'll be quite a bit of overlap or repetitiveness. I think there's a broad agreement on a lot of these questions, but regardless of that, as dedicated security analysts in the humanitarian sector, I believe our job is to help those that help others. In other words, we're an enabling function for effective programming. Again, we've already heard that phrase from Gary and from Eric. Within that wider framing, from my perspective, security analysis is the transformation of information and data into actionable assessments and advice for an audience. Broadly, how this is done is through monitoring, of a given context to identify relevant events, trends, patterns, and scenarios, and more importantly, linking those with provision of related advice or outlooks. Identifying how these interact with your audience's priorities and profile is critical to ensuring the analysis provided is relevant. This cannot be accomplished without engaging with your audience, and we all, as security analysts, try or attempt to engage you all as much as possible to make sure that what we're doing is effective and relevant to the programming that you're putting out there in the field. For our audience, without security analysis, it is difficult for staff, organizations, and partners to assume risk in an informed manner, which is one of our core responsibilities to each other under duty of care. Additionally, I believe this will be touched upon later, but I wanted to note that programming cannot be resilient or conflict sensitive without security analysis. So for us, this might be a bit of a frustration as security analysts, but security analysis has to be fully integrated into planning and implementation processes. It can't be treated as a separate or siloed function or simply as a function of compliance. Otherwise, it will be perceived or it will turn into a hindrance to effective programming. Further, contextual knowledge and raw data are critical components of analysis, but they do not equate to a full effective analysis. We've walked all the way from a brief understanding to something that's a bit more broad and a bit more focused and honed in on the needs of our partners through analysis. Finally, I would say that it's not a crystal ball or a silver bullet, or it fully eliminates uncertainty. This is critical for all of us to understand, and I'd like to highlight this for the audience because I feel that sometimes inappropriate expectations of analysis can contribute to distrust of it as a process or an enabling factor. So I'll leave it there for now.
All right. Thank you both. And that leads me to, I mean, you've already touched on it. You've already started building this linkage between the security analysis and humanitarian operations. But I'm turning to Anne with UNICEF. What are the broader and what's the significance of security analysis in the context of humanitarian operations? So how do you make that connection that Gary and Michael have already started discussing? How does it work and how does it materialize?
Thank you, Eric, and thanks for the opportunity to be on this panel. I very much appreciate the work that you and HCR and other colleagues have done to set this up for us so that we could have this discussion. To build so much on what Gary and Michael have just said, the humanitarian community is facing increasing complexity and uncertainty. Senior decision makers have an incredibly challenging role, and they need effective, tailored analysis, and that includes security analysis to enhance their decision making. And as Michael said, security doesn't exist in a vacuum. There's that complex interplay with many factors, political factors, as Gary mentioned, economic, social, environmental factors. And for us in UNICEF, these factors also impact the needs of children. So they're all interconnected as we move forward. And we take, for example, climate change, which is having an increasing impact on all of these areas and many of our humanitarian contexts. So that brings me to really focus on security analysis and partnerships, to understand the root causes of violence, to ensure our programming is risk-informed and conflict-sensitive, and to make sense of all of this information in a way that supports strategic decision-making. It's crucial that analysis is done in collaboration. So this is collaboration with other security analysts, security practitioners, with other analysts in other areas such as economics and politics, but most importantly with our program colleagues. What are the needs that they see? What are the emerging needs that they see? And what can we do to meet the needs of children? So collaborating with colleagues, and especially those who are on the front lines or what we call the last mile, is really crucial to ensuring our analysis identifies for decision makers the risks and opportunities as they evolve. It enables us to position ourselves to improve our overall preparedness and seize opportunities when they arise. And when it's done well, this security analysis ensures that security as a whole truly enables humanitarian operations. So I'll pause here and pass back, but very much looking forward to the continued conversation. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Anne. And on the same vein, speaking again of the linkage of security analysis and humanitarian operation or humanitarian strategies, I'll turn now to David. I mean, with your experience as this newly appointed security director of WFP, but your previous experience in emergency response, do you also see this linkage, security analysis, humanitarian strategies, operation? How does something that at first appears to be security focused and remains security focused help with the directions that agencies and organizations are taking in terms of their operations?
Well, Eric, thanks so much. And I'd like to echo my pleasure to be part of the panel. I am quite new in the role. Many people would associate the name indeed with programming, emergency operations, and so on. So I'll be contributing what I can at this stage, but also drawing an awful lot from the panel. So it's a really pleasure to be here, and I'll be in the next week in Geneva itself. So thanks for the question, and building on everything that's been said, particularly by Anne just now. from the importance of security analytical work, I certainly appreciate that now from where I'm sitting. But thinking about where I've just come from, the programming side of the house, we are, in a kind of acceleration of complexity. We have a complex set of drivers of a humanitarian need. We are in terms of climate, conflict, but also economic drivers, post-COVID, debt and other things conspiring to increase humanitarian need. Food insecurity, in the case of WFP's perspective, a huge driver at the moment. Food security is security, and therefore food insecurity is a driver of insecurity. Multidimensional risk, as we all know, is increasingly a feature in the fragile environments we're asked to work in, and those environments are wider, more widespread. The need is increasing, yet resources to respond to this need is stagnating. And on top of that, the space for humanitarians to operate is constrained and tight, and really challenging our principled approach. This is the complex scenario we're working within. Now, in response to this, the industry has gotten very, very sophisticated. We have experts on humanitarian military interface. We have experts on access, experts on conflict sensitivity. We have, of course, security analysts. We have emergency coordinators with their own analytical capability. So this is a good thing. It is necessary in response to this, but this raises one of the big challenges that in WFP we're particularly concerned about this, because all of all this expertise gets deployed oftentimes with short-term consultants, standby partners, and so on, with different perspectives, and we run the risk of not being able to integrate and distill out what the strategic decision makers need for day-to-day operations and more medium and longer term strategies. But I agree with what we've heard so far. There's a distinct role for the security analyst, but what we're asking our security personnel and our analysts to do is be much more cognizant of this ecosystem of expertise that is being deployed rapidly in these scenarios, and try to get more coherent. So that's the challenge, but it will be a real opportunity once we master that going forward. Now, what I would add to what we've heard so far is that certainly the analytical role, the strategic analytical role, is distinct, necessary, needs to be properly integrated and linked with the other expertises I've mentioned. But this needs to happen at all stages of the program cycle, so to speak. So from the context analysis, when strategies are developed, to the more operational planning, to the mid-course corrections, to the day-to-day operations at all levels, where they're very local or a bit more national and regional. Security analysts have to contribute to all of that. And what I would add to that is also later on, when we get into after-action reporting, lessons learned, best practice evaluation, we should also have the analytical teams also be involved in that. So we learn how to do it better as, again, we are evolving quickly into these more sophisticated operations, and we can always improve. So I would add that learning dimension in addition to context, design, implementation, support. And I would say that, just to reemphasize what we heard first from Michael, but I think we're all saying this, is security, the security function and the analysts that support it need to be very enabling. And in this, they need to be part of the initial stages of program design and strategy setting, as well as through the obvious operations and implementation, and again, in even the after action aspects. So that's what I would just add to the discussion so far. Back to you, Eric.
All right, thank you. Thank you, David, for a quite insightful and exhaustive list of needs and asks and potential assistance that security analysts can provide. We've started hearing this. I mean, the idea that security analysts need to engage, understand both the audience, but also assist in in moving the strategy and moving the operations forward, and having some sort of a cross-cutting role. But going back to Gary, with your role in the Threat and Risk Assessment Service at UNDSS, and sitting at UNDSS, but engage with various organizations of the UN Security Management System. I mean, how important, and I already know the answer, and I think everybody does, but how important is the collaboration and communication with actors, not necessarily only the United Nations, but humanitarians at large, in understanding the needs related to information and analysis and security analysis?
Well, I'd like to say first that I think the overlap from all of us, Michael and David, is perfect because it reinforces. So when you go back and watch the presentations on YouTube or wherever, I think you're going to really get an enhanced view of all this. I think it's just fantastic. But let's bump this up a bit. I like to challenge audiences. There's an axiom about armed conflict. Amateurs talk about tactics whilst professionals talk about logistics. For analysis, professionals talk about judgment. Analytical judgments are the reasoned conclusions of an analysis. Now, they can be a short-term prognosis, a medium to long-term forecast, an insight into the nature of a threat, or simply making a complex situation comprehensible. The critical aspect of this is that for each type of analytical judgment, there are specific structured analytical techniques that transform information into actionable judgments. And I think Michael framed that very well. Now, as a matter of fact, 2 of the 5 primary types of analytical judgments are fundamentally information and fact driven. Therefore, the judgments they require are about the credibility of sources and information or the relevance of a security incident. Now, I want to take you back to what I said earlier. Analysis enables us to think abstractly about our circumstances rather than just reacting to them. So, whilst data is important, you also need to keep in mind that human behavior is systematic, based on subjective probabilities. So for analysts to provide you, general audience, with relevant and actionable analyses and judgments, they need to know upfront, at a minimum, at least 7 things. Your mission and mandate, where you operate, with whom you interact, your perceptions of any changes, let's say in societal standards and costs of living, your perception of the security environment, especially vis-a-vis those needing your support, challenges you faced in the past, challenges you're facing now. So this takes us actually into the issue of trust. You need to know if you can trust those providing you the analyses. You also need to know if those who are providing you with the analyses are looking after your interests. So to answer the question, went a wrong way, guess what? This means analysis is a team sport. This means we all need to communicate. So we've all heard it, but let's stop talking about breaking down silos. Let's be like Nike. Just do it. That's what I have to say.
All right, and good. And then Michael, I mean, it's gonna go back and forth, and I think we're gonna see an alignment. But we're gonna go back and forth between Gary and Michael. Your role is very similar serving a community. And we've spoken already of understanding, and again, Gary said, understanding the audience, but also having in return the trust of the audience in terms of knowing that you're going to have at heart the analysis that's going to help them with their operation. But the understanding the audience, you're the director of research and analysis for INSO. You have many partners or many organizations that are looking at you to provide analysis to help them make that decision. How do you do this? How do you understand the audience? How do you connect with these? And I'm going to use the word client, and I'm sorry, it's not necessarily the right word, but this array of organizations that are looking at INSO providing this service, which is critical.
Oh, thank you, Eric. And I'm not offended by client. I know what you mean by that, so appreciate that. For us, it's difficult to conduct effective analysis without understanding the purpose of the provided analysis. And to do that, we have to engage our audience. Often to achieve or to start to achieve effective analysis, this is as simple as asking the service user or the client or the partner how they plan to use the provided analysis, or even asking ourselves when we observe something. We might be very excited. We might have felt we've found something very critical in a pattern or a trend, but we have to ask, so what? What does it mean for the audience? So if you're not asking that when you're providing your analysis or generating your analysis, that you might need to take a step back and ask that critical question. I think occasionally when we engage our partners, particularly on ad hoc products, when they come to us with a request, they may be surprised when we respond to the request with, well, what are you going to do with this analysis? Or why do you want to know this? This isn't meant to challenge the relevance of the request or to avoid work, but it's to ensure the answers that we provide are best tailored for the end user. This often facilitates the joint formulation of a better question between the requester and the provider. And when I'm actually recruiting analysts, one of the things I look for from an experienced analyst is they ask these types of questions, and I find it the mark of an experienced analyst. All this has to be underlined by intellectual humility and active listening. Generally, I'm not here to debate end users of analysis. I want to know their requirements, and I want to respond accordingly, I'm also interested in their perceptions and their assessments, as they are always relevant, and they may even be more advanced or accurate than what I can provide at the moment as a dedicated security analyst. Also, selfishly, and out of a bit of laziness, without this engagement, it makes it much more difficult for me to prioritize the information and outputs. And this can lend itself to over-contextualization or focusing on irrelevant information. In other words, I'd be wasting my time or your time. And all of us have experienced this. Some of us have been responsible for this, including myself, but we can go to briefs, we can hear a person talk about a topic, we walk away feeling that that person is a subject matter expert in that topic, but we don't feel even any more equipped to actually make an informed decision. So to avoid that, we're always encouraging our analysts to make sure they know why they're doing the analysis, even if it's a bit annoying for the end user. We do struggle, or we're still building our capacity in terms of MEAL to understand the relevance in a more formal matter. So we do have formal indicators like click rates when we put out reports, or we do key informant interviews centered around what an NGO is doing and what is keeping a manager or leader up at night, for example. Finally, the last thing I want to say on this, as an enabling factor for programming, it is key to involve programming staff in this entire process, because they are the best positioned to utilize the information and analysis, and they understand the requirements the best out of all the stakeholder groups, I would say personally. I believe there can sometimes be some reticence by program staff to engage in analytical and advice processes, but they often have the best insights, and ultimately they drive the requirements as the end user of the analysis that we'd like to provide our audience.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Michael, for that. Great points. And just continuing on this, like we spoke about the audience, understanding the audience. I mean, you've been both the provider of analysis as well as, I guess, the recipient of analysis. Can you give us example? Okay, or give the audience examples on analysis, enhancing effectiveness, and the safety of humanitarian delivery. I'll let you choose the example. We're showing now the next mile, or the next the so what. So you're doing the analysis, and then what does it bring to operations like UNICEF's in the field?
Thanks so much, Eric, for this question. And I think there's a lot of examples to highlight, but I'll focus on two right now. The first one, I'll take the example of the polio program. Again, interagency program, lots of INGO partners, government partners, civil society. Security analysis supports the situational analysis and risk assessments. It's key to effective actor mapping, and that actor mapping feeds our access strategies, our engagement strategies with communities, with local leaders. What we found is that when the analysis is done well, we reach tens of thousands more children than when the analysis is not done well. And when it's done collaboratively, we reach more children than when it's not done collaboratively. So that's one key area that we really focus on the analytical work to support the polio program. Another example I'll take, the recent coup d'etat in Niger, right? It was a bit of a surprise to colleagues. Our security analysts in the region work closely with other analysts, including INSO, TRS, WFP, to develop scenarios. And these scenarios supported not just UNICEF leadership, but senior leadership in the country, region, and at headquarters. After these scenarios were developed, it wasn't a stop, right? There was continued engagement, indicators were continually monitored, and as the needs changed as a result of the changing political situation, the analysis was able to support programs to adjust as they needed to adjust in Niger and in the surrounding region. So this worked really, really well to update and adapt our program delivery based upon a changing context. So back to you, Eric. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And as a moderator, I'll still give an example. I mean, for us at UNHCR, it's been a long interaction between the field security service providing analysis, but also our colleagues from the emergency service who work in the same division. And this constant engagement in looking at changes in situations, what it means for security, and that would be our side of the shop. But what does it mean in terms of displacement and being able to potentially anticipate, as we're seeing today, for example, between what is going on in Darfur and the impact it has on influx of refugees into Chad? It's a constant discussion that we need to have. Not as, I mean, to ensure that we increase our preparedness and potentially better our response. And this is something that is in the same vein, and it makes it easier for us. We work in the same division. We have this constant interaction, and I think throughout the questions and the answers so far from the panelists, it's this importance of making sure that we can have this discussion from the very beginning, anticipating, preparing, and responding in a better way, thanks to an analysis which in itself may be driven by security needs, but may serve and benefit a wider community within humanitarian organizations. So that's it. David, we discussed about ensuring that we have the collaboration with an audience, we understand the needs, there was the word trust that was used on ensuring that the client, if you want to use like, the user of the analysis, the end user of the analysis, has the trust that the analyst providing the product or providing the analysis has the interest of the organization. But now I'm going to speak about the challenge of misinformation or disinformation in our current world. I mean, it's a lot of information and not all of it of quality, unfortunately. How important, and again, why is it important that accurate information is there to do proper analysis, which would be critical to rapid, strategic, and life-saving decision making?
Well, maybe addressing the question in a slightly different way. I think the consensus here is certainly that we need accurate, and I would add relevant information. We really need to understand the requirements of the end user decision maker. And so we need to be as sharp as possible. But as you say, there are increasingly impediments to that, getting in the way. We now have, of course, we're in an age where there's a tremendous volume growing almost exponentially of data, information, good and bad. There's the speed at which this is generated, at which this has impact is also increasing. And we have, with the penetration of the internet and connectivity to the deep aspects of all these environments we work in, we have low barriers of entry in terms of those that want to get connected and use these platforms for whatever reason. All of this is a phenomenon that we need to counter, get on top of, and manage so that we can actually distill out that accurate, relevant information and analysis for critical, timely decision making. Now, in this regard, we, of course, are all facing misinformation, disinformation, malinformation, hate speech phenomenons in so many environments, particularly in social media. And in some cases, this is outstripping the skill sets that some of our analysts have developed or arrived with over the years. Also, some of our techniques are being outstripped. So I think there's a need for us to look at the training and skill sets of our teams, exchange ideas on how we are all dealing with this phenomenon. And as we do this, there will be, of course, the opportunity for technology. AI, for example, is something we're exploring to sift through all this information, again, good and bad, to help with the distillation process, but it will never replace, in our estimate, the analyst. The analyst skills will just be needed to be more sophisticated, and the techniques we use to distill and out what is valuable and relevant will, of course, have to be provided by human analysts, so to speak. Now, the interesting thing about partnership, we've talked about partnering with the operators, the programmers, the implementers. What in this particular phenomenon, there's an interesting internal partnership with our communications teams, which are immersed in monitoring social media. So this is an important partnership we've seen that we've had to develop with our security analysts and again, our communication teams. Now, so much of this, countering this challenge of misinformation, disinformation, and so on, is been reactive. And we have to find ways to when it erupts and unexpectedly, certainly manage that in a reactive form. But increasingly, we need to be more proactive and preventative. And so picking up trends when they just are starting to incubate in whether it's an ethnic conflict or a conflict over resources that starts to play out in social media. The obvious thing is to watch major events like elections and well in advance start to develop a strategy for monitoring and also countering messages and so on that are emerging on these platforms. So this eventually we need to be quite attentive, for what's on the horizon, and again having techniques to counteract this with our communications teams. But at the same time, the analytical role, the core role, as I said earlier, is that distillation to figure out through all the noise what is essential for the decision maker and the operators that we're supporting and enabling. I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you, David. We had another panelist who we still hope is going to be able to join and wanted to address this question, but I'm going to put it there to the panelists and about technology and use of technology and what advancement can we use today in order to ensure that we get the data or we identify trends. I mean, what are there any examples of technological advancements that can be used to better security analysis or to pick what is available out there, being careful also about misinformation and disinformation, of malinformation, as David was speaking. So any of the panelist member, if you want to jump in on this one. Michael, go ahead. Oh, sorry, Gary, I
No,
didn't see your hand.
Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, I was jumping in because we had a long pause. Nothing particularly insightful, so I'll cede the floor to Gary fairly quickly. But I think from my personal experience, proactive, I think, is a very relevant word to use here. When people have been bringing up AI over the last year or two, have been fully rejected the idea and the concept, and seen it as a threat. But I'm slowly being converted to the idea is this is something that we're going to have to use and leverage. So just more broadly, I would say, particularly for AI, for example, I think as analysts, we're going to have to get used to the idea of remaining competitive by leveraging AI. I'm assuming that it's no different than when Al Gore's internet became a bit more prevalent in use. There's probably provisions or prescriptions against using it, particularly in the academic space, but we all use the internet now as a source of information. So I would say proactivity, using it as a tool, because from my vantage point, it looks like some of the AI is just a quote unquote human face to linear regression modeling, for example. You ask a question, it goes off and does the work, and then it comes back to you and gives an answer that's a bit more digestible for somebody that's not smart with stats like me. So just wanted to throw that out there very quickly. Not a full answer, but just my initial thoughts.
No, good. And I think you've already answered maybe one of the questions that has been asked already from the audience, but we'll come back to it after. Gary, you had your hand up.
Yes, I mean, look, it's here and the marketplace is persuaded to take it. There are aspects of AI now that make life a lot easier for some analysts. And as Michael said, it brings a lot of data into a form that's digestible, especially for the analysts to sift through and things like that. Right now, and I've done some experiments with ChatGPT, and they do get some things wrong because ultimately it's about who cleans the data. And so you have to be on guard, even with the AI phenomenon and that is upon us. You still need to look at what AI presents with a critical eye. But they can do a lot of things in terms of sifting and gathering data a lot faster than any of us could. But this is why we need to rely on structured analytical techniques, because ultimately facts are facts in terms of an incident and where things are emerging. So it's a hand-in-hand approach I think we need to take, and not just throw everything onto AI. And David said it, we still need a human brain to carry this through. I mean, we're a couple of decades from AI even being close to being able to fire up like a human brain can. We can still do many more things. So this is why I mentioned judgment earlier, because that is the cognitive aspect of all this. So the domain for the analysts may not be subject matter experts in the future because of AI, but human beings will still have a significant contribution with applying analytical techniques and using their judgment. That's all I have to say.
Yeah,
thank you, Gary.
No, I think Gary's points are excellent. I would just throw in a couple more because you asked about how some of this is emerging. More from my program background, one interesting area is natural language processing. So AI can listen to radio broadcasts and podcasts and whatever is emerging and help you distill out trends and messages. It takes a sophisticated algorithm that you would have to develop, but that AI work is already accessible and can help sift through what I was talking about earlier. Obviously, we've all said it, AI can help us deal with the large volumes and the speed at which things are being generated, both good and bad information. I think that's it, but we understand that. But ultimately, and Michael said it, it's a tool, and it's a just a sophisticated tool that's at our disposal, and we just need to get the skills in place to use it to our advantage and not let it somehow have the tail wagging the dog. Now, this is not the topic for this panel, but I'm just going to throw one thing out there that AI implications for some of the things we're analyzing will be important. There will be AI-generated misinformation. We need to understand that kind of phenomenon. There will be autonomous weaponry. There will be decisions made on algorithms, in terms of military decisions and so forth, more than a human with a joystick. So these are the new wave of threats that are AI-generated. Not again for this panel, but just something to throw out there that relates to the AI issue.
Thank you, David. And to the audience, I would like you to welcome, and for the panel's member as well, Christina, who has just joined us. I'm sorry if there were technical problems. So Christina, Director of Insecurity Insight, who's now joined us. And it's a perfect timing, Christina, because you're just joining at the moment where we're discussing technology. And I think you have, in previous discussions ahead of this panel, you have raised this regarding technology. So now that we finished the round, could you tell us a few, give us examples on use of technology to make sure that we have this can advance analysis or better analysis or adapt analysis to various audiences?
Thank you, and thank you very much to the UNHCR team who worked really hard in the background to work on the technological challenges that, I don't know, Microsoft just wouldn't let me join, but I'm really pleased to be here. And as Eric said, quite ironic because the first question to me was really about technology. And so yes, the issue really is, how do we use technology and how does that influence our security risk analysis? And obviously technology, as we've also seen, is a huge issue and one where we're seeing a lot of innovation and challenge. But I just want to share 3 very concrete examples of where we have seen the way we do the security analysis really change because of technology changes. So the first is what kind of information we get from conflict affected areas that influence our security analysis. And that's because they're social media. And in the past, we would have the official story of the conflict parties. Then we had the war correspondent going in there, filing the stories. Today, we are nearly live getting the stories of conflict affected peoples all coming at the same time, and we have to make sense of them. So that's one way in which technology, I think, really influences what we get. Then there is social media and all the discussions around it and the sentiment. And there's also, I think of that as a massive focus group. It's something where we can be the fly on the wall and just listen in to conversations about what do people think of the aid sector, of the humanitarian principles, of the way the aid is delivered. And it's technology that helps us to find the right stories. And then finally, there are also, I think, really exciting ways we can use very basic technology and combining that with the AI to gain new insights. So just one example, we're working with a group who uses Raspberry Pis. They're these tiny little computers, cost less than $50 and are the size of a cigarette box. And if you attach an antenna to it, you can actually record radio programs. And if you then apply the AI technology, that natural language processing that identifies what the relevant conversations are, suddenly you can also hear what people are saying on the radio. And I think that's important because in many conflict affected areas, it's radio that's still a key source of information. So I think technology, with all the challenges of joining meetings, is actually fundamentally changing how we can access information. And the big challenge for the security risk management and the analysis is, how do we make sense of all these multiple sources of information?
Yep. All right. Another important point here on ensuring that we can rein this in order to get better analysis. Now, mindful of time, we've got 12 minutes left before we open to the question and answer session. So now I'm just going to go. We've discussed partnerships, we've discussed technologies, we've discussed ensuring how security analysis assists with preparedness and response and decision making in operations. Now, just going maybe the bigger picture, or asking other questions. Christina, it's still going to be. I want to stay with you for the next couple of minutes. Security analysis, in looking at mitigate adverse impacts on affected population. It's linked to preparedness. It's linked to a part that we discussed with Anne before. But how does it do that? How does security analysis, again, people tend to look at security risk management, but then we're looking at the route of security analysis helping affected populations, and can it provide information? Can it provide analysis and help?
Well, thanks. This is also a really great question. So obviously the first objective of security analysis is to enable aid agencies to have really good security risk management, to send staff into dangerous areas, to make sure population and needs are reached, and you gain humanitarian access by doing this. But there are other ways, in particular, if you do very nuanced analysis of specific sectors, where the mindset of the security analysis really also gives useful ideas of how to work within a programmatic response. So, for example, if you know that in a conflict, energy supply is attacked, then you will know that this will impact the cold chain within a hospital, that will impact the vaccinations, it will impact the HIV drugs. So that can then give you information that really you need to concentrate on putting generators and the right amount of fuel in the place. Or if you know that in particular conflicts, it's the granaries that are burned, then you know people's food supplies are taken away, and a few months down the line, they will be food insecure and there will be displacement. So that can give you the information that you need to go in early with food aid to avoid that additional displacement. So I think the sort of the mindset that comes from security analysis, that experts have become so good at helping aid agencies to think about their own staff security, can bring a lot to the programmatic responses by giving really useful ideas of how the delivery of the key services, what the purpose of the aid sector is, really can be also protected through that sort of mindset and that analysis. And that's why I think it's so important that these discussions are sort of taking further as it's happening at this HNPW here.
Yeah. Michael, I see you nodding. Same question. I mean, does security analysis enhance the capacity of local actors? I mean, you're working with various number of actors on the ground and strengthen partner. Does it help the local actors and the communities when you provide products? When you provide this analysis, does it go all the way?
Thank you, Eric. And this is kind of a topic that I think is at the forefront of everybody's mind. Just to kind of flip the question or flip the answer, I would say that effective analysis and relevant analytical questions catalyze true examination of threats for all staff and organization types. So this is regardless if they're national, international, local, expat, etc. This is not to disregard the nuance or vulnerabilities that may characterize certain segments of the sector or certain stakeholder groups, but I believe the best practices are already there. We just have to do a better job of applying them and making sure these tools are available to all of our colleagues. So to focus rather on what's different between these stakeholder groups, I'd like to focus on what's similar. Local actors have duty of care obligations that must frame their risk management strategies. They possess agency and influence over their risk through risk management. They have capacity and vulnerabilities, and there's a growing set of accessible tools and sources for analysis, even for local actors. Further, just as with international actors, particularly international NGOs, there's diversity within the larger group of local actors. So it is critical that we continue to engage all of our stakeholder groups, including our local actors. So ultimately, every individual, organization, even cluster within the sector has different requirements and use the analysis in different ways. For example, a local NGO involved in last mile delivery has a very specific and operational set of demands for analysts compared to my colleagues who sit relatively comfortably in HQs in Western Europe or North America. To speak directly to the affected communities aspect, again, I think security analysis is essential to conflict sensitivity and similar endeavors towards effective and principled programming. It is possible that historical understanding and contextual knowledge is one of the strengths of local actors. However, like with all service users, an analyst like myself or the colleagues on the panel can help transform that knowledge into actionable insights and advice and ultimately better programming. So as analysis is becoming increasingly available and democratized, we hope that INSO is playing a role in this development. With that, the inclusion of local actors in networks and forums is a force multiplier for the entire community as a shared resource as they bring novel expertise and knowledge, which is ultimately a net positive for all actors, including non-local actors. Finally, as mentioned before, informed assumption of risk is something we all owe each other. As analysts, risk managers, programmers, whatever your role is within the sector. Quite often, at least for international NGOs, one of the primary modes of engagement with local actors is through partnerships. This might be slightly controversial, but when given the opportunity, and it was more so in the past when I was in the field, now that I'm at HQ, but I would advise all local actors when involving themselves in partnerships with international organizations that they ask, why don't you do it? That's the first question they should be asking, because then out of that falls out, well, these are your strengths, these are your capacities. We feel that you can confront this risk in a way better than we can. So with that question and being prepared to answer that question as potentially international partners, I believe we can contribute to a more nuanced discourse, particularly on local actor risk, and how they effectively deliver programming. And this can bring us closer to where we want to be as a community in terms of duty of care.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. And I think you're raising a point here that may be a subject of another session in the future: transfer of risk, and how do we do it, and what are the best ways of doing transfer of risk? And I think you've just tackled here with that question from local NGOs to international NGOs. I think it's a critical point. So maybe something for HNPW 2025. All right, so we have time maybe for one last question, and I'll turn to David. We've discussed security in risk management, helping better delivery, better preparedness, better response, security analysis in assisting in enabling humanitarian diplomacy. And that will be you're the last panelist for this strategic insight sessions before we open the Q&A. So yes, does security analysis play a role in supporting, enabling humanitarian diplomacy?
Well, absolutely. And that last discussion on localization, of course, fits right into that, because when you talk about humanitarian diplomacy, we think oftentimes of these grand, Security Council level type of discussions, but really an awful lot of this relates to access negotiations at a very, very local level. And obviously the localization agenda and everything we can do to support it is an enabler for community acceptance to enhance security and then help access negotiations is certainly desirable. Now, the analytical work of the security analysts, again, what I said earlier at the outset, where we do have to think about coherence with others that are working on various other analytical products that relating to access, conflict, sensitivity, and so forth. So assuming that we do achieve that coherence, security analytical work can certainly play its part, particularly in areas of actor mapping, really understanding actors, and again, through things like social media monitoring and analysis and other analytical work to really understand where these actors are coming from, their position, also, you know, what to assessing to a certain extent their degrees of strength as they go in to humanitarian negotiations and discussions with humanitarian diplomats, to coin a term. The security analyst can contribute a lot to that, so that going into those negotiations, there's a better understanding of the actors involved and the positions that might be negotiated. And then hopefully that's married with a seasoned humanitarian diplomat, because that's where the importance of experience, of empathy, of humility, and the adherence to principles throughout the negotiations will be so critical. And that's up to those individuals. But the analysts, as I said, can certainly contribute with the preparation for those discussions. And again, that should be at all levels in varying degrees, whether it's very local, a bit more sub-regional, subnational in terms of regions, or even at the national level. So just stopping there for the sake of time.
All right. Well, David, thank you, and thank you to all the panelists. I think we've reached the hour mark, which is what the goal we had to have the panel, and now we're going to open it for the next 20-25 minutes to questions. There are already questions that have been posed in the window, in the chat, the Q&A window. So I think there was one on AI, and I think we've already answered that one. But so the first question, which is about analysis, but with the end product. How can we ensure that security analysis integration into the SRM effectively leads to acceptable risk decisions at a country level? So it's very UN-sided with the terms, but basically, how do we incorporate security analysis so that it impacts positively a security risk management process, and that basically we operate, or humanitarian actors as a whole operate within acceptable risk in a particular operation. So it's the linkage. We discussed a lot about analysis. I think Gary spoke about it at the beginning, is the linkage between security analysis and security risk management. I would like to answer the question.
I can
Gary,
start it
go.
because it goes back to what I said in my initial comments, because ultimately the security analysis, you have to look at it in as a whole with respect to security risk management. It's the information component. It's providing, so look at the analyst as the information provider with the analytical judgments that feed into the security risk manager. So the security risk manager can then take those analytical inputs. And there is, you know, I think we've all talked about throughout the morning or the afternoon, your time, about everything that goes into this. So let's pack all that in to then saying the end state is the conclusion, the analytical judgments, taking everything into context, and then feeding that into the risk manager. So then the risk manager then will have to conduct the actual processing of security risk management activities and actions for doing the mitigation strategies and the security plan, and assess the risk, the potential impacts of threats. And again, it's all about, this is where the term enabling will come in, because these should be working hand in hand with those providing the assistance. How the ultimate question is going to be, how can we do what we're supposed to be doing? And so there's a symbiotic relationship, and I think Anne really framed it well, the one word, collaboration. So nothing should be in a vacuum here. And I will pause there and see if anybody else wants to come into that.
Michael?
Yeah, again, not a very coherent response, but I just find all these questions and the inputs from the panelists very interesting. Just from one perspective, I think one thing that we're coming to terms with quite often is that the end users and the organizations that we deal with are at different parts of the spectrum in terms of being able to handle risk management. So some NGOs are sometimes just getting started on the idea of formalizing the risk management processes. I think NGOs by and large do a commendable job of managing risk, even if it's not formal. But the structuring of risk management, I think, is helpful for everyone and it makes it more efficient and effective. So I think it's important for us to, particularly when we're dealing with partners one-on-one, is to understand where they are in their journey in risk management, I should say. Otherwise, you might be speaking about horizon scanning and anticipatory analysis and integration of outputs when they're really at the stage of, we don't really have a centralized database of incidents that impacted us over the last few years. So I think it's critical to understand where your end user is. And then the other thing, I think I keyed in on this phrase in a previous panel, and I don't think the person that asked this means this specifically, but I do think it's important to highlight acceptable risk decisions. If we link that to risk tolerance or risk appetite, we're really pushing NGOs and individuals to understand what their risk appetite and risk tolerance is. If they don't understand that, then it's very difficult for us to give them advice that's relevant for their work. And we all know that there are organizations that are on opposite sides of the spectrum in terms of what they're willing to deal with and what types of residual risk they're ready to deal with. I don't make decisions on that. I don't judge that. I just want to make sure that that is something that is thought out and well articulated within the ranks of our end users and partner organizations. So I just wanted to throw that on the table as well.
Okay. Another question from the and again, it may speak to people who do analysis on a day-to-day basis, but I may not want Gary and Michael to answer the question, but it's about the concern that analysis might be constrained by inherent bias, potentially bring our ability to or the inability to recognize what's going on around us. And I know for having discussed with Gary on several occasions, I mean, bias and how do we tackle the inherent biases of individuals is a major issue, both in terms of analysis, but also in terms of security risk management. So basically, what steps do we take or can be taken to ensure that analysts have a greater or have go beyond or above those biases, and also have latitude sometimes, and that's the second part of the question, have a latitude to go beyond conventional narrative, somewhat what is expected from the analyst as opposed to what the analyst would like to share. So all up to you on both the biases, but also how do we give free latitude to analysts?
I can kickstart it. I don't want to dominate, but I can kickstart this. First of all, UN analysts are titled security information analysts because they can acquire and analyze information from sources, but are restricted from directing them. So in other words, they can ask about what you're seeing, and I'm talking about humanitarian actors on the ground, partners. And then we can ask about your perceptions, but without influence. That's just within the framework of our work modalities. But let me put this in practical terms because I think I can address the issue of bias, just one little piece of the pie. A starting point for analysis is what we call the normality baseline, and it is an early warning mechanism. Every country and sometimes even provinces have historical sets of normal conditions that are unique to the population that are best understood as, let's say, a predictable set of outcomes from a controllable set of inputs. That is, the population itself has unique historic expectations about Who's responsible for providing food, shelter, safety, the basic necessities? And when changes occur within the population, within a country, within a province, they may signify larger factors at work, especially with respect to instability. And these are the important entry points for analysis. And when you look at it from their perspective, you start to erode your own biases because it's about them and how they have dealt with issues historically that are unique to their culture, unique to their society. And therefore, the normality baseline is essential for gauging whether a departure from the norm has occurred or whether that departure signifies systemic instability or even failure. So the analyst has to sift through these things, looking at the population and how that's impacting the humanitarian situation on the ground through the lens of their eyes, their behavior. So that starts to erode some more bias. Now, without direct insights from a trusted partner who is working with the communities themselves and communicating what they're experiencing, the effectiveness of the normality baseline as an early warning tool is reduced. So we rely on structured analytical techniques and viewing situations through the eyes of the population, through the eyes of those who are working with the population, doing all that great work, that naturally starts to erode bias. And so ultimately, and I want to go right back to what Ann was talking about, and Michael, well, all of us, David, active collaborative partnerships between security information analysts and humanitarian workers are essential for effective mutual support, which again erodes bias. So we need to be careful about mirroring. That is, when you view geopolitical and security related events, be wary about putting your personal judgments, here's the bias, and feelings on those who are instigating or even participating in those geopolitical and security related events, because it all comes down to trying to avoid a trap that we all fall into every once in a while. Well, if I were so and so, I would, fill in the blank. You just something that we have to keep and watch on ourselves. And also, this is where partnerships, the communication, asking, the trust that we have, that it's not about us, it's about them. So I would say that mirroring is the number one cause for inaccurate analytical judgments and poor risk management decisions. So we need to understand how they are approaching problem solving management, crisis management from their perspective, not ours. And that is the first step. And it's something that is a continual process because we're all human beings with biases. And so it's something that we all have to maintain watch over.
Yeah, thanks, Gary. I see David has a hand up, and then Anne.
Yeah. So just quick points. I think Gary said it very eloquently about, and I would subscribe to all those points. So just building on that, I do think there's within the cadres of analysts we built up, which are of a certain. They kind of school oftentimes dominates. We may have some bias awareness efforts that could be. We're talking about that internally at WFP. Then to counter that going forward, there's issues obviously of, and I think this has been said, of building more diversity in the teams. In terms of the analysts that we're going to take on board, and then exploiting partnership I would fully endorse that. This builds on the localization agenda we talked about earlier. So if a point that we didn't make enough was that we can actually, the security analytical work can be also a bit of an exchange with local partners in terms of providing some analytical products that are a little bit broader or helpful to local partners, but in turn, with a bit of training and exchanges and so on, get also some exchanges of information and those diverse views to also counter bias as well. And then lastly, we could keep an eye on some of the thinking that in fact, the UN is involved in this, that is very concerned about bias being built into AI, algorithms and so on. There may be something that comes out of that work, which is underway, that might help us inform how we combat this issue within the security analytical community. I'll stop there.
And Anne, you are next on the topic of bias.
Fantastic, fantastic comments already. So one, collaboration, right? Having a diverse team and a diverse team or a diverse network that you draw information from. Having that base is really, really important. And if you find you, as an analyst, you only see the same views, then you're not doing it right. So that's really important to recognize that you see all of the differing views, that you have a diverse team and diverse sources, that you use a structured analytical technique. These are best practices from various analytical areas. You have a certain situation, you're doing a type of analysis. Here is a guide to help remove some of the bias. And then finally, I think the most important thing that has not yet been mentioned by my colleagues is the importance of peer review. When you think you have it, going to a trusted person who will challenge your assumptions, who will challenge your judgments, to come back and say, look, you really have a blind spot here. So that importance of peer review, it cannot be understated. Thanks, Eric.
So that brings me to a question. A lot of the audience members are asking the question, and I assume it's because a lot of them are relying on external sources, external, call them what you want, security risk analysis, think tanks, providing them with analytical product. So pros and cons, internal analysis, external sources, external companies providing analysis. I can see some evident ones, but to all of you, Christina, you haven't had your time because of those technological problems. Do you have a view on this, external versus internal? What are the how do we rate this in terms of analysis support?
No, thank you. That's a really, really excellent question. In my view, it's not so much a question of whether it's external or internal, but the question is, what's the analytical focus? And that to me is the key issue, because with many, in particular commercial products, the focus is essentially on maybe the extraction industries who may work in insecure places or some other commercial interest. So they may take a very different view and perspective from what an aid agency needs. So in that case, I think it's problematic if you rely too much on external because they ask the wrong questions. But if the right questions are asked, I think it contributes to challenging the sort of biases that may be there. And I think a diversity of sources is absolutely essential. But we need to make sure they ask the right question. And the final point is very much related to what was said before. It's essential that the sources are sufficiently provided, that everyone can make their own judgment to what extent they feel they can trust them and build their security risk management on these sort of information products.
Okay. All right. And then we had Gary, is that a hand that I see? No, it's not. Okay. And then I had another question which comes, and maybe David, looking at, because you both your current role and previous roles, what do you think are the most pressing emerging threats that security analysts need to look at for the humanitarian community, given what we're seeing? I mean, this rapidly changing environment. What are the priorities that security analysts should be looking at?
Well, where to begin? I mentioned earlier, food security is security, and so that relates to really understanding resource-based conflicts. So this gets into local issues in provincial and subnational level as well, and resources, water, food, these type of things. These generate an awful lot of conflict. So there is expertise available in-house and with partners to help on that, but the security analyst needs to understand that better. We have, working with partners like the Stockholm Institute, we have proof now that, or evidence that this is indeed, we have a lot of conflicts driven by resources, and there's ways to combat that. So security analysts, I do think, need to understand that in an era of climate change and so on. As I said earlier, there's a lot to understanding the threats that AI will be generating. I rattled off a few of them. There's going to be many more. I do think we're going to have to get a good sense of that, particularly autonomous weaponry and AI, supported, algorithms generating, certain conflict decisions by partners, or AI used for misinformation. As I said earlier, we're going to need to understand all of that. And so there's a kind of challenge of skills in those areas in terms of emerging threats. And we didn't talk about it, so let me just make it now since we're running out of time. There's this whole issue of data visualization, particularly geospatial information. And I do think that's a skill that we're going to need to develop further more and more, because there's so many tools out there, and that can be such an effective means of communicating with decision makers and providing analytical products of use to local partners or other partners and so on. So I do think that's out there as well as something to think about as we go forward. So I would say those would be some of the kind of challenges I'm seeing on the horizon, aside from the ability to finance quality analytical work going forward, given what we're all facing these days.
All right, and that was one of you've already answered. Oh, Anne, I see your hand up. On that topic, maybe on the one of
thank you. To compliment David, I think funding is one thing that we had a note separately. But if analysts don't have the ability to really engage with partners, many of them, I think, Michael, when you're sitting in a headquarters in Western Europe, your ability to really understand the conditions in another area is challenged. So funding is really important to make sure that analysts are as close to the problem as possible. But from a more strategic perspective, just to echo some of David's comments, it's really important for analysts to understand the strategic drivers of insecurity. And those are usually geopolitical, socio-economic, climate causes, and being able to recognize the impacts that these have on security conditions in a local area. And that skill is very important moving forward, especially when we focus on preparedness and looking forward rather than managing and reacting to a crisis that we're in now. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Anne. So we are getting to the point where I'm going to offer the opportunity for each of you to give me, reflection, a takeaway, something that you would like the audience members to go back to leave this panel with an idea for them, for their organization. So I'm gonna start with David, and then it's my screen. So I'll go David, Christina, Michael, Anne, and Gary. What is your final reflection? What would you like to share?
Yes, so as on that point that we've just landed on in terms of the resources as the constraints we're facing, you know, we are facing a complex set of drivers, multidimensional risk, generating increased need for intervention while resources are stagnating. And of course, we have shrinking humanitarian space. All of this points to a smarter way of working. We have to develop a smarter way of working, leveraging technology, lessons we're learning, partnering at all levels, particularly local, as we emphasized, and more diversified partners from different perspectives. So all of this means that we should actually not have analytical work being the first to be cut, which is oftentimes as budget decisions made, they normally cut monitoring and analytical work and so on. Rather, we should double down on analytical work, but find ways to do that or affect that through smarter partnering, the use of technology and knowledge, and ultimately get more efficiencies that allow us to practically do that, and then of course generate better decisions and support better decisions. And so this is what we're going to be working towards in the security realm of WFP, where we're under those tremendous budget pressures going forward. But we are going to try to preserve this analytical function and make it more robust, and even develop it further by really looking at what we can exploit to do a smarter approach. So I would just say leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Christina.
Well, if I can condense it down to one word takeaway, I would say cross-fertilization. And I think the sort of analysis aspect is really sort of in the middle, that has the potential to connect so many aspects of the aid world in a really efficient way. It can help making programs better, at the same time being better connected to the programs, and the diversity of people will improve the analysis in the way Anne said about understanding the drivers of the violence, and also the bias issue that we discussed. So I would say cross-fertilization of how analysis can support the aid sector holistically by interacting better and getting other parts of the aid sector to interact better with the information products that come out of this sort of analysis.
All right, thank you, Christina. Michael. Yeah, you're still unmuted. All right, Anne.
Thanks, Eric. I think, to echo what others have said, it comes down to partnerships, right? The analyst needs to be a partner to program colleagues to understand where humanitarians need to deliver and how we can find approaches together to enable them to deliver. And the more we work together in the design, in the implementation, the easier it is on decision makers, because we have hashed out many of the issues. We provide them with options which have been thought through and peer reviewed. So really seeing the analyst as a collaborator, as someone to really partner with in the design and execution of programs, is really crucial to all of our success. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael, can I come back to you?
Yes, let's try this again. I was trying to find my
Works
mouse, my pointer, so apologies for that. Just very quickly, ultimately, everyone is responsible or has some responsibility within risk management, and all of us, as our colleagues have said before, engage in some sort of security analysis. From our end, we're always encouraging our partners to take agency and take control over their risk management portfolios and profiles. And when we encounter partners that might verbalize or act as if they can't engage in security analysis, we have to say to them, you can and you will, because no one else is going to do it on your behalf. So just as parting words, we're specializing in this, but we're a support function, and we ask that our partners continue to engage in security analysis and take risk management very seriously.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. And then Gary, last words of wisdom or reflection.
Well, Anne and I have worked together for years, and I knew she was going to mention peer review. I had it in my notes to say, let's talk about peer review. And I thought, you know, I bet you Anne's going to mention it. So that was great. But with everybody, I think this has been a lovely panel. I mean, all the insights, regardless of overlap, because I look at overlap as reinforcement. So I think that Christina, David, and Michael, I think it's just been a pleasure to be on the panel with you. I just want to leave with just a couple of words, because I think everyone has really summed it up very well. But in all seriousness, I'll leave you with a warning. The pace and frequency of climate, geopolitical, and security related events are increasing, the pace and frequency. So we need to work together to avoid being overcome by those events. So I think that as a very first step, and this is regardless of all the technologies and initiatives that are out there, from where I sit and my experience, the very first thing we need to overcome is communication. And it's interesting because we all talk about silos and breaking down silos, but when it comes to actually doing it, people still say, this is mine, that's yours. Look, folks, things are happening in the world that are making us all we're all in it together. And we have to overcome our conventional norms from the past and really start to talk to each other. And I think everything that we talked about today will be for naught unless we do. And I can say that it is happening in the field with the analysts and the aid workers. They're all starting to do it now, because I think the realization is, we've all got to work together to expand our ability to deliver what we need to deliver. And I'll leave it with that.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you. I mean, it's going to be probably, if I do a wrap up, a repetition of everything that's just being said. And I think not that we rehearsed well this panel. No, it's just that there's a common view on security analysis, but I would say analysis in general, because we have heard a lot of the talks that we had today started with security analysis and helping security risk management, and then very quickly, or at least I hope all of you had the same feeling, that it went just to analysis in general, and security analysis slowly going into assisting programs, preparedness, everything from our activities to humanitarian diplomacy, as David was speaking. So I think this is the message for me, is how analysis, and of which security analysis is a component, plays an important role in ensuring that you can anticipate, you can actually direct as an agency, as a program person, as a security manager or decision maker. You can look at how things are going, getting all the information, getting this judgment done by an individual, be it an internal analyst or an external product, for as long as it's well defined and the questions are asked properly, is how all of this assists in making sure that we're more effective in how we deliver. So that was one takeaway for me. We as analysts do a support service, as Gary said, but I would encourage audience members in their various agencies to invest, as David said, in analysis, or reinforce existing analytical capability you have, in order to ensure that the safeguarding of our colleagues in the field, as well as the effectiveness of our program, is bettered or brought to another level. When I heard the word partnership, it's also ensuring that security analysis is brought from the very beginning, and in an operation, or as you are planning, opening an office, responding to a particular situation, is ensuring that security analysis in general, and security risk management, because there I'm going to make the linkage with security risk management, is brought also from the very beginning, explaining what type of program is envisioned, so that your security advisor, your security analyst, and your security advisors are aware of the direction the agency is going to take and anticipate, and that's part of the analysis, on the potential threats that may emerge from our response or from the environment. And I think that again is evidence, is the evidence of the support you can bring to ensure that we get this this forecasting, if you want to use the word, on what could happen to humanitarian operations, and therefore have scenarios better and be able to better cope with whatever is going to face us. So that would be my wrap up with the word of partnership, and I think it's only fair that partnership is used in the HNPW weeks. So I will stop there with the time of our panel ending. I would like to thank the 5 of you again for joining this this panel, and I would like to thank all of the audience members for listening to us and asking questions. And I hope you benefited from this strategic insight sessions. Thank you very much. Have a good end of the week, a good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you may sit. And for those of you who will be in Geneva in person next week, or even virtually, there's another week of HNPW with more sessions. So I invite you to register and follow and participate in discussion. So thank you very much to all of you, and have a good rest of the week and a good weekend.
Thank you. So long.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.